One way I like to look at it is context of conversational leadership, which I hear you talking a lot about the VUCA, the complexity, the hyperconnectivity, the speed of change, all the context that makes conversational leadership important. Sure, we can talk all about that. I'm not sure if that's definition. It's related. And then literally, David, just this morning, probably prepping for this, I thought of just like finance or economics has microeconomics and macroeconomics. I wonder if in conversational leadership we need to talk about micro conversational leadership and macro conversational leadership. David and
Yep.
I have gone back and forth a bunch of times to say, well, yes, it's about conversations and a conversational approach to life, but it's also the awareness that there's a conversation happening across 8 billion people, and it's easy to feel helpless and not a part of that scale of conversation, which is more macro. So sure, we talk about conversational tips and tricks and that kind of thing, but there is something about the collective reasoning, the collective sense making, that's another major part of conversational
Yeah.
leadership. So my one main point there is like context, micro, macro, if that makes any sense. And then the other point I want to make is the three questions that I love for conversational leadership. Haven't said them in a while. Let's see if I still remember. One key question for me is, what is the conversation that this group needs to have right now? And I hope that makes more sense now in the micro and the macro. Yes, if there's five of us in a room, what is the conversation that the five of us need to have? But what is the conversation that 8 billion of us need to have? I think it works at multiple levels. That's question number one. Question number two is, in what way do we need to have this conversation? One of the most frustrating things for me inside an organization is, oh, we had a conversation about that. You'll
Yep.
see that in a memo. You'll see that, from a senior leader. We talked about that. No, we didn't. You told me about it. There was no back and forth. And so this whole conversational leadership thing is sometimes we're polite and we say that there's levels of quality of conversation. And you just telling me something, maybe it's a conversation,
It's
but
another
it's
conversation.
it's a very one way. It's a very low quality versus I think what we're trying to do right now is more of a back and forth. So that type of like just realizing what we really mean by conversation. And I guess the
Yeah.
last point I'll make is, you and I looked it up in Webster's dictionary once, and in just the word conversation in Webster's dictionary says an oral exchange between two people. And I think you and I have both gone,
It's
ooh,
far
that's
more than that.
yeah,
Far more.
that's a way limited. It's definitely more than two people. It's definitely more than just people talking.
So for me, conversational leadership is a response to the complexity of the world. It's about us rethinking about the way that we think and the way that we work together. And we've got two words there in conversational leadership. So the first word really is leadership, and it's very much about seeing leadership as a practice, not as a position of authority. So in a complex world, an individual manager, individual leader, they really don't have the ability to make good sense of the world and make good decisions. We need more distributed leadership. We need everybody who can step forward and lead to lead. So that's the leadership part. And then the conversational part is really, again, it comes down to this inability for a single person to think or make sense of things. So it's about thinking together. It's about having the conversations that we need to have together to make better sense of the world, to put meaning to that sense making, to make better decisions, and to innovate somewhat more wisely. I was at a conference not so long back, and the keynote speaker, started off by saying knowledge management was about getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And quite frankly, I wanted to cry, because classically, traditionally, that's what knowledge management has been about. It hasn't been about managing knowledge as such. It's been about managing information. So capturing knowledge, categorizing it, tagging it, putting it in databases, all those things that traditional knowledge managers do are fine. You need a good solid informational base to operate, as a knowledge manager. But of course, the real issue is not so much getting the information to the people, is the people having the ability to interpret it, to make sense of it, to make meaning of it, to make good decisions. And these are things that the technology can't do. Even AI is not particularly good at it at the moment. Maybe it will be one day. So for me, getting the right information to the right people, even in knowledge management, when we talk about sharing information, the word is always sharing. It's never about thinking together or reasoning together or creating new knowledge. It's about sharing. It's about me, John, telling you where to find the report. It's in the top drawer of the filing cabinet. But it's not about how to make sense of that report. Conversational leadership goes sort of one step beyond knowledge management, or it goes to where I always felt that knowledge management should be, but the focus has never really been on that, making sense of things, making good decisions. I mean, the only person really who's ever really talked about that for the last 20, 30 years is Dave Snowden. And I don't think too many people in the KM world particularly have heard his message. So if traditional knowledge managers really want to make a difference in their organizations, then they need to start to think more about decision making other than just getting the right information to the right people.
I'll add in, not disagreeing with any of that. I'll add in that, the blur between knowledge management and information management, and in KM, we still do a lot of taxonomy, document management, content management, records management. That's
content management. Yeah.
Part, just like we're trying to say, conversations are a part of conversational leadership. Content management is a part of KM. But I think for me, the word I might use, if it's not too much, is the relational side of knowledge. The fact that individuals have knowledge, but there's also a shared knowledge between two people, like almost implicit knowledge. It's that somewhere between us type of knowledge. And to me, if we can talk about tacit knowledge, the tacit stuff gets activated, gets sparked, something happens when it's in dialogue, when it's in conversation. It's between one or two or 5 or 10 people. That's way different than managing documents or, the traditional forms of KM. And so I don't know that I want to say conversational leadership is the future of KM. I just think it's a underutilized, underrealized.
That's it. Yes, it's underutilized
portion of KM.
Yeah. Although I think in some ways it's especially as AI comes into the picture and handles a lot of that management of information, the information management side of it, more effectively, then the interpretation, the conversations, the dialogue, the debate, the decision making, the sense making, the decision making, that becomes more and more important, because it's what as humans are, at least at the moment, better than AI, and that's what we should be doing, in my humble opinion.
Sure. I see this question here, very related. How does conversational leadership strengthen knowledge management in practice? What do you think?
Here's an example. I was thinking earlier this morning about that question, and some years ago, I'm going back maybe 15 years, I did some work with ING Bank in the Netherlands, and they had a small KM team. It was like, what were they doing? What they called it? Future forecasting. There's a word for it, isn't there? So they were, being in the banking industry, a lot of regulations, new regulations, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of turmoil at the time in the banking industry. And they were looking out and writing short reports once a month to send out by email to various parts of the organization, to maybe to tell them what's going on, maybe to inform them of new regulations from the central bank or whatever. And they'd done that for quite some time. And then they had a wonderful idea. At least I thought it was a wonderful idea, because what they started to do, if they saw a big issue that they thought would have an impact on the bank, not only would they send out the email, they would convene a knowledge cafe. They would bring people together from different parts of the organization to have a conversation around how maybe that new regulation from the European Central Bank would affect their organization. Was it a risk and was it an opportunity? And so they were building on that traditional concept of knowledge management, getting the information to the people. But now they were building on it by saying, okay, now let's talk about it. Let's make sense of what's going on. Let's see what the impact is. And I think it just seems to me that's just a very nice example of the sorts of things that we're talking about in conversational leadership.
I love it. And for me, I love to bring in the organization development and the Gestalt psychotherapy.
Yep.
I think it's too easy to underestimate that as a knowledge management practitioner, we can set up communities of practice, we can do a network analysis, we can do expertise location, knowledge cafes, we can do all these great people and process and tool techniques. But how often do we hear about adoption or buy-in or resistance? And that's not really the job or the skill set of a KM practitioner to go in and say, well, these people don't like each other, so I guess we can't do a knowledge cafe, right? So like the conversational leadership side is like after action reviews only work if people can speak honestly.
Yes, exactly.
How do you create conversational environments for that? Peer assists only work if curiosity outweighs ego. How do you work with ego when you're just using, using KM techniques? There's something else going on here. Communities of practice only work if trust is there. Knowledge retention only works if assumptions can be surfaced safely and courageously. And I do think that's part of the work of conversational leadership, where we're coming in and saying, sure, we can set up all kinds of different conversational designs and approaches. What does this conversation feel like, and what can we do to make that human to human, that small group, large group, small group, large group?
I'm really with you on that, John. We've touched on this a little bit in our podcasts at times. I think in the KM world, there's been far too much focus on training people in individual tools. Here's how to run an AAR. Here's how to run a peer assist. Here's how to set up a community of practice. And there's not really been enough focus, I don't think, on what you're talking about here, and that's the quality of the relationships between the people in the organization. Because if that's not there, these tools are not going to work. And it's always been it's always brought me great sadness that's what I think is the most powerful knowledge management tool, and that's the after action review, is so little used. And I've never quite understood that, but I think a big part of it is because it's just seen as a tool, as a technique. It's not really seen as part of everyday living. Because each and every one of us, I mean, we could do it now after this little talk, is to say, hey, okay, what do we intend to do? What went well? What didn't go so well? It's so easy to do, but for whatever reason, we don't do it.
Mm-hmm. We take it for granted, and that conversation doesn't get convened. To Patricia.
Yeah, you're right. That conversation doesn't get convened. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's one of the things I learned about KM is, so often people are doing KM, they don't even realize it. And one of the things I've come across much later in my KM career is, it's okay to do KM here and there, but there's this dance, this balance of how much time passes between your KM activities. Do you do an after action review once a year? Do you do an after action review once a day? How much time needs to go between them? And I think from a conversational leadership point of view, it's a different angle on, we're in conversations all the time, but is this the conversation we need to be having right now?